Hello everyone, this game is going to be my second game in the London League. I was playing against a very strong Fide Master, so don't be fooled by the deceptive rating of 1945. He's more like 2350, I would say. And our team was also being outrated by about 200 points on average across the boards. So we were expecting to maybe lose, say, 3-1 or 2.5, 1.5. But I was white, so thinking perhaps I could get something in this game, because we've had several matches and we were in a situation where we'd drawn one game and I think each of us had beaten each other once. So this is our fourth game together, and I played c4, e6. It's one of the most challenging moves, at least for me. To which I play knight f3, and then the quick d5 could create a sort of Catalan position if I play d4. But instead I play e3, which I may give up playing soon, because I never seem to get much advantage as white. Knight f6 and b3. The whole idea behind this system is to play bishop b2. It's like a reversed Queen's Indian setup. But because white is a tempo up, normally there aren't that many problems. So bishop b2. And then he does play the most challenging line. If black had one more move, they could play the move pawn d4, which would block my bishop, and it's a very annoying move. It sort of cramps my pieces. And I actually believe that white has no advantage after d4. So I took and he took. And every time I've played this kind of position before as white, I played the move d4. And it often leads to positions where black will get the isolated pawn on d5. I don't actually need to take here straight away, but this is just a good example. Bishop e2, castles, knight bd2. And black is absolutely fine here, so white has a nice structure, and black can try playing d4 quite soon, which will liquidate the pawns and lead to a fairly equal position. There'll be lots of trading going on. But they can't do d4 just yet, I don't think. Rook e8, I think, is a little bit better. And then castles. And I've won most games as white playing this system, although I've had quite a lot of draws as well, and the occasional loss. But this match, I chose to change my setup. And I had thoughts about playing bishop b5, because I think I saw a game of, might have been Dubov against Aronian, where he played bishop b5, and it led, I think it was a draw in like 20 moves. But yeah, it doesn't seem too bad, pinning the knight, getting ready to castle. But I played bishop e2 thinking I could treat it like a Queen's Indian, and then I could maybe castle and play d4 later. But black now plays d4, and I realised that actually this is absolutely fine for black. It's gone back into the sort of Queen's Indian plans where black plays their d-pawn up, and black is actually threatening pawn d3, so castles would be a huge mistake. We traded, and I tried playing bishop b5 here, so I've lost a tempo, lost a move with two bishop moves to get to b5. But I thought if I could castle and check on e1 with the rook, I may have an edge. And I remember there's a position with queen e7 and then queen e2 takes, king takes, and it's about equal, but white apparently has a small edge. But instead bishop c5, and I castled. Apparently bishop takes knight is stronger. Black also castles, and I decide to swing my knight to c2, attacking the d4 pawn. Black pins my knight, so I decide to gain time with rook to c1, attacking the bishop. Queen d5, very good move, defending the bishop and also attacking my knight on f3 again. So I come over, and if black played the move knight to e5, I was going to have to play knight to e1, which looks horrible, but I may actually be alright in this position. So knight e5, knight e1, and if a6, bishop e2 is just about holding. If black tries d3, I can grab the knight on e5 with the bishop, and if pawn takes, I just take back with the queen. I should be okay here. So black does not play that. They actually take me. And this will lead to my pawn structure being absolutely terrible. I've got 2 isolated pawns on the F file and 1 each on the D and H files. Yeah, my pawns are a mess, but I do have the 2 bishops, which may be a long-term endgame advantage. Then apparently knight e5 is best, but he played rook a d8. And I decided to try swinging my knight to d3, blockading their d4 pawn, and actually having a good place for the knight on d3, controlling lots of dark squares. Also, it was attacking his bishop on c5. He moved. I then decide to get rid of a couple of pieces on the board, and now my space being cramped has been mostly mitigated by the trade of pieces. I don't have the 2 bishops anymore, but I was hoping that if I could win the d4 pawn, then I will be a pawn up. Maybe I can grind the win. Apparently knight d3 is best, but I played rook c4. I looked at the move bishop c3, which seemed interesting to me. Takes, and then rook d2 is actually quite surprising in that it's hard to deal with. If I block with my rook, they can just protect their rook with rook f8 to d8, and I'm sort of stuck at the crossroads. If I block with a knight, the knight's then pinned, and perhaps black can go knight d5, attacking my rook. And if I move a4, then I've weakened my pawns. So again, black may be able to put both rooks on the b file, with rook b2 and rook b8, and catch the b pawn. So that looked awkward. I think I would have had to do this, though. Instead, d3 was played, and then I found bishop d4, blocking the rook's protection of the d3 pawn. So it's an interference tactic, but also attacking the a7 pawn, and there is also the potential to take his knight in the future, doubling up the pawns in the same way mine are doubled up. Apparently knight e8 is best, which I did not see at all. I don't think he did either, because he would have played it. But that is a incredible move, knight e8. I don't think any human could find this, to be honest, because it just looks like I'm winning the pawn. But apparently the knight can come round to sort of d6 and then maybe to f5 and attack my bishop, and I have to be extremely careful. But yeah, that's a very, very difficult move to see. He took, which is a reasonable move, because that way the d3 pawn is safe for a little while longer. Then I thought rook c8 was best, but then it doesn't really challenge me too much. I can just play rook d1, or I can trade first and then rook d1, and I should be fine. So instead, knight h5. The idea is knight f4, guarding the pawn. Apparently bishop c5 is best, but I missed that move. I played rook d1. Rook d7, and I realised what it was he was planning, but I thought I saw a tactic. Rook fd8, then rook d2. And the plan is, if black plays something like a6 to just get rid of that pawn weakness, I can now play bishop e3. And can you see why black can't just take the rook twice on d2? What's wrong with that move? Black can take once if they choose to, but the problem is that if they take again on d2, I will actually mate them with rook c8. So black cannot win any material in this line, and I'll stay a pawn up. So instead, g5 is played. The idea is knight f4 to e6, which then would use the pin on my bishop to win it, and also the king now has to square g7 if I move my bishop to e3, so there won't be a checkmate for me. I think my only move was king f1, knight f4 with that plan, king e1 guarding the rook. Again, my bishop now has the option of bishop e3 or c3. f5 from black, trying to gain space. And apparently bishop e3 is best, although sorry, bishop c3 is best, I mean. And this is apparently better than my move king d1. But I wanted to avoid all checks with knight g2 and knight d3. and it's still guarding the rook, and I may want the king on the queen side to help my A and B pawns run up the board. Knight g2, then bishop c3, knight back to h4, so attempting to win the f pawn. And here what I choose to do is trade a set of rooks and offer the trade of the next pair of rooks. And if he takes me, I take him. I'm attacking the a7 pawn as well. So black may not have enough time to win my pawns on the king side before my a and b pawns run up and make a queen. Rook c7, I guarded my pawn and the bishop. King f7, and on the site we were using, I didn't even realise that my opponents had offered me a draw. I would have thought about it a while now, because I am a pawn up, but for the team, we had lost on board 4, but I think we'd had a draw on board 2, and the board 3 teammate was in a winning sort of position, or in a much better position and way ahead on time. So if I'd have taken the draw here, then assuming that our board 3 won, we would have actually drawn the match. So that was a little annoying to realise afterwards that the draw had been offered. I played a4, trying to push my pawns. Knight g6, I think the idea is knight f4 and then rook moves and then knight to d5 and he wins the bishop. So I prevented that, king d2, guarding everything, and rook b7 was played. I think centralising the king is a little better, but this is still not bad. I play b4, and again, apparently just centralising is the strongest move, preventing my rook coming to d7 or d6 or d5. But yeah, knight f4, I play rook d6 to go rook h6 or rook f6. And perhaps rook h6 is the strongest move, but I played rook f6 simply to... bishop d4 apparently is best. Oh, I see, guarding the f2 pawn. I didn't look at this. Bishop d4. Yeah, better than my move. I was attempting to just get rid of black's counterplay on the king side, but unfortunately, if too many pawns are traded, then it could be a draw anyway, because I won't have enough pawns left to safely get them to become queens. Then bishop d2, rook f1, and I play king c2. Knight e6, preventing me going rook g7, which would have forked the 2 pawns. So I come around with rook a5, and black is going for the pawn. I allow it to happen, and this should be a winning position, because my bishop is going to overpower the knight. Knights are really good when there's only one area of activity on the board, either king side or queen side normally. But if there's stuff going on both sides, then the knight can't get over fast enough to control both, but the bishop can. So my bishop can simultaneously help the pawns and also prevent the black pawn from becoming a queen. I played b5, black moves the king over. King c3 is not the best, but I was just nervous about any potential pins on my bishop. King c8, I play a5, knight c5, and I just completely blunder here. This is a terrible move. I should play something like bishop f4, or even king c4 would win. A6 is probably okay, but then knight e4 makes it very, very complicated, and I lose the bishop, but might still be winning. But yeah, just move the king, or play bishop e3 or bishop f4. But instead I thought I saw a winning tactic, but it turns out this may be a draw. I played rook c7 to trade the rooks, because now I win it back. But then I didn't realise that when I attack the knight, it can come to a6, which looks ridiculous. But if I take, I'm left with what's called the wrong rook pawn. My a5 pawn will promote on the square a8, and my bishop does not control that square. So bizarrely, if black actually black doesn't even need to take the a6 pawn, he can just go king a8. And if the king stays in the corner, I can never promote my pawns. So it's a really strange position. I play bishop g3 to try and force a Zugzwang in some way. Apparently h4 somehow draws, where if I take it, the knight can go to c7, which is the key move. And then if knight takes b5, it's a draw. So I have to go b6. king c6, and black actually can just leave the knight hanging for the rest of the game. And if I ever attack the knight with the bishop, knight a6. And somehow I can't win. It's an amazing position. And the knight can just keep going back and forth to a6. So difficult to find. He was down to about maybe a minute or two on his clock. I had about 15 minutes. But I was a bit annoyed to have messed up this badly. Fortunately, he played king a7, which is a blunder, because now I have king d4. And if the king goes back to b7, which is a potential move, I can now go bishop d6. And what's going to happen is the king is going to be forced to go back and forth to a7 or a8. So the king will move. If the knight ever moves, I'll take it. And then I'll win with the extra 2 pawns. And although it's a slow process, I simply march over to the pawn and then go all the way back around, eventually forcing the black king into a potential zugzwang. So here, for example, I believe I can play king to c8. I think it's king c8. It might be king c6 actually, but I remember that when I checked on the analysis after the game that it said this was good enough. And then if the knight moves, I can take it with something. So the king has to move back, and then I believe that I think it's pawns b6 wins, threatening b7, and if black goes what was it, knight to c5, I believe I can play a6 at almost any given time. So bishop back to f4, knight back to b7 is a move, but then I can play a6, and I think I win. If knight back to a6, I can then play b7 and then check, and I should win this. So king c6 I think also wins in a similar way, and king c6 might actually be stronger, to be honest, because king c6 prevents knight to c5, and king a8. Again, I can push, and the king is bizarrely in a kind of stalemate position. He can't move, so the knight will have to go somewhere. And if it moves to b8, I take it. If it moves to c7, I can take it with the pawn. That's not stalemate. Knight c5, I can take it with the bishop, and knight b4, I can take it with the bishop. So this is a black kind of zugzwang here, and b7 is also a key threat to win the game. So yeah, it is actually winning. But instead of the king moving, black decided to play knight b4, and the idea is to come back to a6. I think I played bishop d6 with the same idea that you've seen a moment ago, with the bishop dominating the knight when it comes to a6. He saw it, played knight c2, but now the knight goes too far away. At knight e3, I'd have had bishop c5 with a fork. So I play it anyway, force the king back, and then a6. The black knight's too slow, and he resigned, because b7 check is coming, and then my bishop can control the promotion square of b8. So overall, I thought it was an okay game, but my opening was not that good. My middle game, I did get tied up a lot, but I was able to survive, and then later on, at the start of the end game and end of the middle game, I think I was then sort of equal / a little better. And with the win of the pawn in the end game stage, I think that was what allowed me to get to the very superior position near the end. And then, of course, the blunder, rook c7, just, I think, possibly made it a draw all the way back. Of course, there might be some computer line where I win, but after those rooks came off, I think black does have a draw, which is very bad play from me. And I really just got very lucky that he didn't have more time, because I'm sure he would have found the drawing maneuver h4 at the right moment to draw the match. But we won on board 3, and so surprisingly our team won. We got a win on boards 1 and 3, so 2-0 up. Lost on board 4, but then got a draw on board 2. So we won the match 2.5 to 1.5. There'll be another game in this league next week, so I'll do a video then. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.